Stop it! You're spoiling it! You're spoiling everything!
There are many betrayals in Game of Thrones. Littlefinger betrayed Ned Stark in the very first season, the Night's Watch betrayed Jon Snow, and, well, the Red Wedding.
The Lannisters send their regards.
It's a pretty heavy-handed theme in the show and the books it's based on. War is bad and it makes people do bad things, and people who are honorable and try to do the right thing often don't live to see the end of that war. Betrayal is a big part of Game of Thrones, but I forgot to mention the most heinous and biggest betrayal in the entire show, the betrayal of D.B. Weiss and David Benioff.
And are you happy with how things ended?
Yeah.
She didn't say yes. You didn't say yes.
Best season ever!
Well, that was totally what season 7 was all about,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Exactly.
Character development,
Lob it all in.
story.
How do you feel about the way that it ends?
There are no better writers in television than Dan Weiss and David Benioff. They ended it brilliantly, better than I could have imagined, and
Season 8 of Game of Thrones was a genuine heartbreak for me. I won't pretend like I've been watching this show from the very beginning. Whenever it first aired, I was still pretty young. I started watching Game of Thrones just before the release of Season 6. I was hooked pretty much instantly. From the beginning, I had a very real connection with these characters. I cared about Jon and Daenerys and Robb and all the direwolves, and especially the dragons. I had never seen a story this ambitious and expansive. You have to tell it from this many angles and perspectives. I honestly thought it couldn't get any better, and then I read the books. When I first started reading the story in high school, I was not very big on reading, but these books changed that perspective for me. To me, this is the best way to experience this story, but still, that doesn't mean I wasn't super excited for the future of this show. After all, George R. R. Martin likes to take his sweet time. The Last of the Thrones books came out almost a decade ago, so for the near future, the show was all I had, and when Season 6 was released, that didn't seem like such a bad thing. I get that Season 6 of Game of Thrones has its issues. I fully acknowledge that. But man, I cannot help but love this season. Hodor's death was one of the most impactful for me personally in the whole series. And then you get Jon's resurrection, Jon and Sansa's reunion, the Battle of the Bastards, and Cersei blowing up the Sept. The first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones is what I would call a slow burn, especially for someone who's new to the story. There are a lot of characters and houses and locations. It can kind of make your head spin. In the earlier seasons, you got like one fight an episode, if that. But the tension slowly builds up more and more throughout the seasons, all leading up to Season 6. Again, sure, it has its issues, but it finally felt like a payoff for all that tension that had been building throughout the entire series. The Starks are back, Daenerys is finally heading to Westeros, and Cersei is at peak evil after losing everything. The rest of the show was set up to be great. But then, the showrunners decided they wanted to play a game with the last couple of seasons. This game is called Wouldn't It Be Cool If? Fans of shows and movies play this game all the time when waiting for a new season or a new movie to come out. For example, wouldn't it be cool if this character and this other character had sex? Wouldn't it be cool if this character could beat this other character in a fight? Wouldn't it be cool if I uploaded more than once a month? You get the concept. It's an idea that doesn't really go much deeper than, yeah, that would be cool. Well, not only did D&D start including these in the actual show, they pretty much lived exclusively by them. Wouldn't it be cool if Jon and Daenerys had a thing for each other?
You are my queen. I don't know what else I can say.
Well, yeah, it would, but you have to flesh it out. Whenever Jon and Daenerys get together, they barely know each other. Jon kinda got one of her dragons killed, but at the end of the season, they still have boat sex. Wouldn't it be cool if Jaime faced down a dragon? No, not really, because the dragon would just kill him. There used to be consequences in the show. Jon let the wildlings through the wall, he gets stabbed. Robb breaks his betrothal to the Freys, he gets himself and a bunch of other people stabbed. Jaime saves Brienne from these dudes, now he has a golden hand. But when he charges at Daenerys and tries to kill her right in front of her dragon, well, Bronn comes out of nowhere and saves him. Where are the consequences? Season 7 is full to the brim with these wouldn't it be cool ifs. And it just doesn't work. It feels more like fan service rather than the well thought out and written plot of the earlier seasons. But Season 8 is the worst offender. One of the things Game of Thrones is known for is its big shocking twist. Ned's execution, the Red Wedding, Jon's death. This story had some of the best twists in television, but leading up to the final season, there were a couple of questions on everyone's mind. What's gonna happen to Jon? How is Cersei gonna die? Who's gonna kill the Night King? Who's gonna get the Iron Throne? And is Daenerys gonna become the Mad Queen? Well, the showrunners decided to stick to the theme of always catching fans off guard. They wanted to be sure no one saw this shocking ending coming. Well, they sure did that, because no one saw how fucking shitty they were gonna make this goddamn show. Basically, here's what they did. Fans think Jon or Daenerys is gonna kill the Night King? No, it's Arya. Fans think Jon, Daenerys, maybe Sansa will end up on the Iron Throne? No, for some reason it's fucking Bran. Daenerys does become the Mad Queen and Jon kills her. Okay, so this dragon is about to fuck his shit up, right? Nah, he kills a chair. Okay, so then Grey Worm is gonna come and fuck his shit up. No, he just arrests him. Okay, so what do they do to him? Send him back to the Wall. But isn't the Wall destroyed, and the Wildlings aren't even over there anymore, and the White Walkers are dead, so why is he being sent there? Well, I think because something had to happen to him, and the writers couldn't be bothered to think of an idea for longer than fucking 27 seconds. Obviously, all of this is horrendous. It's a crime that the show ended this way, but I think there's a crime even worse than Dumb and Dumber here are guilty of. They ruined the characters. All of them. If there's something you should know about me, it's that characters are more important to me than anything else in the story. When I think back on Last of Us, I don't remember the plot or the gameplay, I remember Joel and Ellie and their relationship. When I think back on Avatar: The Last Airbender, I remember Sokka and Aang and especially Zuko. And in the future, when I think back on Game of Thrones, I'll remember Daenerys and Jon and Jaime and Tyrion and Cersei and Ramsay. I'll remember the Red Wedding. Not because of how shocking or surprising it was, but because that's when one of my favorite characters in the show died a cruel and tragic death. But in the span of 13 episodes, these two performed the biggest act of character assassination I've ever seen in my life. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to be going through and explaining exactly what they did to ruin the main cast of Thrones.
Last time we spoke was at Joffrey's wedding. Miserable affair.
It had its moments.
Alright, I'm gonna be honest. The first time around, I did not enjoy Sansa's part of the story much at all. I was really young and all the King's Landing bits were mostly just talking and politics and stuff I just wasn't very interested in. But now that I'm older, watching all of it again, well, it's still a little boring, but definitely better than before. Seeing Sansa go from this little girl who loved songs about knights and love and an epic hero on a shining steed to this rough, ruthless political leader who learned that things are a lot different from how the songs tell it. But the transition from this Sansa to this new one is a rough and often painful transition. Sansa's direwolf is the first of the pack to die. In the books, Lady is described as the smallest of the pack, the prettiest and the most trusting. Lady reflects Sansa at the beginning of the story, the pretty, trusting little Lady Stark. And just as Ned was forced to kill Lady, his eventual death would kill this Sansa as we knew her. Sansa spends most of the story in the hands of Cersei and Littlefinger and the Boltons, even married to two of the Stark's greatest enemies. But she survives it all, because the death of little Lady Stark was not the death of Sansa. Now she's someone else, someone stronger than before. She's a grown woman now. Her pretty exterior doesn't reflect the scars she's gained along the way. She trusts no one except for her family. Sansa's actor Sophie Turner has a tattoo of House Stark's symbol and the words, "The pack survives." I think this embodies Sansa's character in season 6. Sansa has been a lone wolf for years at this point. She hasn't seen another Stark since they left home in season 1. And as soon as she escapes Ramsay, she goes to the only family she thinks she has left. Jon Snow. In the show, they kind of allude to Sansa being rude to Jon when they were kids, but in the books, it's much more evident. It's one of the reasons that Arya and Sansa never really got along. Arya loved Jon. She was much closer to him than any of her true-born siblings. Arya called him brother, but Sansa would say half-brother or bastard brother. But even though she might not have loved him like Arya when they were kids, Jon is still her family. If they were together, then they wouldn't be lone wolves anymore, and the pack would survive. And we sort of got this in this scene. But from season 7 onward, it feels like Sansa has completely forgotten that. After Jon was named King of the North, she opposed him publicly and openly several times in front of the lords and ladies of the North. She undermined him many times throughout the last 2 seasons, and during season 8, after Jon returned to Winterfell with Daenerys, which, don't worry, I'll get to those two, but it just felt like she was straight up working against him. After the Battle of Winterfell and the White Walkers were defeated, she still refuses to give Daenerys even an inch of respect or gratitude after her army and her dragons helped them win the battle. But when the story ends, Sansa is on the path to becoming Cersei. She's ruthless, cunning, intelligent, and most of all, power hungry. I actually think they could have played this in a very good way. If the show had ended with Sansa starting to become more and more like Cersei, and this is viewed as a negative thing, I think it could have worked. It could have been a really tragic ending. Being in King's Landing and around her for so long has corrupted Sansa in a way. Cersei and Joffrey tore her down for so many years that now she lusts for power so she can feel strong and in control, and she's willing to go as far as working against her own brother to get what she wants. It could have been a tragic ending to a tragic character arc. In the beginning, she wanted to be queen by marrying a strong and handsome king, but now she'll do whatever is necessary to gain that power. But instead, the showrunners framed the slow transition into Cersei as a good and positive thing, because they didn't give a shit.
I wish I was the monster you think I am.
Ever since my first time watching Game of Thrones, I've had this conflict. I really could never decide between my favorite character, Jon Snow or Tyrion Lannister. On one hand, Jon was this awesome, badass zombie king who killed ice monsters with his Valyrian steel sword and had the coolest direwolf, the White Wolf, king in the north and rightful heir to the Iron Throne. Jon is the traditional medieval fantasy hero. But then there's Tyrion Lannister. He's a dwarf, he likes women and alcohol. Tyrion, for the first 5 seasons, is the smartest person in Game of Thrones. You can make the argument for Cersei or Varys or Littlefinger, but Tyrion was always a step ahead of them, and his character was set up for a really good arc. Tyrion went from the hand of the king to sleeping in a dusty little room after he led the defense of King's Landing. It was his idea to use wildfire, but none of that mattered after Joffrey's death. He was falsely accused of killing his nephew, betrayed by the woman he loves. He killed his father, he was stuffed in a box, and he got shipped overseas. But after that, whenever he met with Daenerys, it felt like a completely different character. Peter Dinklage is a very good actor. He's probably the best actor on the show, and he did his best with what he was given, but the problem is what he was given.
Nobody thought of that. He's bringing all the dead people back to life, and they put the women and children in a crypt with all the dead people. So, rah. Tyrion is smart, but I guess not that smart.
The smart, cunning Tyrion Lannister seemed to fade out of existence. Every decision he made seemed to be the wrong one. When he was handed the king to Joffrey, he was the one ruling the kingdom while Joffrey was off being a sadistic cunt. But let me ask you, what cunning decision does Tyrion make in seasons 6, 7, or 8? Because I know it's not this one.
All hail Bran the Broken, first of his name, King of the Andals and the first men.
On that note, why the fuck is Tyrion handed the king to Bran? Because last time I checked, it wasn't hands Bran needed. No, but seriously, Tyrion helped the woman that destroyed the capital and probably killed hundreds of thousands of people in the process. Also, he's a kinslayer and a suspected kingslayer. So why exactly is he given it?
He's made many terrible mistakes. He's going to spend the rest of his life fixing them.
Oh. Okay.
Well, he's up fucking balls and hunting whores. Or is it the other way around?
There are few characters in this whole show that makes me as sad as Jaime Lannister. For me personally, this scene was the most impactful in the series. Whenever I started watching Game of Thrones for the first time, I already knew Ned's fate. After all, it's pretty hard to avoid watching Game of Thrones spoilers. So when he was executed at the end of season 1, it wasn't much of a shock. When Jaime Lannister got his hand cut off, that genuinely shocked me. I had no idea that was coming. The consequences in Game of Thrones were so unlike anything I had ever witnessed in a show or movie or game. George R.R. Martin really likes to tear his characters down for their arcs. Jaime's source of pride comes from his hand. He's one of, if not the best swordsman in all of the Seven Kingdoms. The hand he killed the Mad King with, the hand that made him the Kingslayer. We learn it was all a lie. He killed the Mad King to save the very people that hate him. Martin does this to other characters as well, breaks them down just to build them up stronger. Jaime's source of pride is represented by his hand. Cersei's source of pride is House Lannister and her family, which is represented by her long golden hair, which is taken away during her walk of shame. Jon's pride is represented by his trust in his brothers of the Night's Watch, which gets taken away from him when they betray him at the end of season 5. Jaime was set up perfectly to be built back up stronger than he was before, which is represented in his relationship with Brienne. He gives her his sword, Oathkeeper. The Kingslayer died when they cut his hand off, but Jaime Lannister still has a chance for life to redeem himself and become something more than the man that betrayed his king and forsook his vows. And what does he do with this chance? Well, he goes back to Cersei for another 5 seasons. Oh, and then he goes to fight the White Walkers and has sex with Brienne, and then leaves her to go die with his sister. Fuck me. Okay, I know this one is a little weird, but Drogon, Daenerys' main dragon, is a completely different character to me in Season 8. I realize this is kind of like saying Ghost is a completely different character, but dragons in Game of Thrones have always been kind of a mystery. Some Maesters of Westeros say that dragons kind of have a magical intelligence behind them, that they're even smarter than people. But from what we've seen in Game of Thrones, that's not the case at all. Just to list a few examples is when Drogon snapped at Daenerys while he was eating, or when one of the dragons killed this guy's sheep and almost killed him, or when they did kill this guy's kid. From what the show has shown us, these dragons are feral animals, like raising a wolf in the real world. Is it possible? Yes, but it pretty much always ends badly. You can't really tame a dragon. The only reason that Daenerys and Jon in the later seasons can ride them is because of their magic dragon blood. But apparently that all changed in Season 8. Okay, let me set the scene from Drogon's perspective. I know he didn't see Jon kill Daenerys, but from his perspective, Daenerys, his mother, who hatched and raised and fed him, is lying dead on the ground. Jon is the only person in the direct vicinity, and he's holding a blade with his mother's blood on it. A feral animal, let's say Ghost for instance, would kill the person who killed his master. And time again, the show has showed us that these dragons are feral animals. So Jon should definitely be getting burned alive or eaten whole. But instead, Drogon burns the Iron Throne. Which means he is intelligent enough to understand symbolism, because this is the thing that got the other 2 dragons killed because of Daenerys' lust for the Iron Throne. And it also means that he understands English enough to even know that this is the Iron Throne in the first place. And if he is that intelligent, he should understand that Jon killed Daenerys. So why the fuck doesn't he kill him? Come on, man, how do you fuck up the characterization of a fucking dragon? Earlier in Tyrion's section of the video, I mentioned my conflict of who's my favorite character, Jon or Tyrion. But as I talked about in that section, Tyrion was pretty much unrecognizable after Season 5, which left Jon as the clear favorite. In Season 6, Jon peaked for me personally. He was resurrected, killed the people that killed him, led an army of wildlings south to retake his ancestral home, was named King of the North, and it was revealed that he was the son of Rhaegar Targaryen. Jon began as the lowly bastard of Winterfell, and by the end of Season 6, he was the true heir to the Iron Throne. Also, he might be Azor Ahai. That's a thing, maybe. But just like the rest of the characters I'll be talking about in this video, Jon seemed like an entirely different person from Season 7 onward. For 6 seasons, Jon was an active character. When Jorah Mormont died, he found the people that killed him and got revenge. He led the defense against the Wildlings. As Lord Commander, he formed an alliance with the Wildlings and let them through the wall, saving thousands of lives. He fought against the White Walkers at Hardhome and even killed one of them. After he was brought back to life, he left the Night's Watch and led his army in the Battle of the Bastards. Granted, if Sansa hadn't come along with the Knights of the Vale, Jon probably would have lost that battle. But without the Wildlings and Jon commanding them, the Starks would have never risen back to power in the first place. Jon Snow is an active character, and that started out true. Jon went to Daenerys because they needed help in the fight against the White Walkers. But what exactly does Jon do after he meets Daenerys? Have sex with her? Get Viserion killed? Because that's all that's popping out to me. Who is Jon in Seasons 7 and 8? Again, in Season 1, he was the Bastard of Winterfell, and his season was about his transition from that to a true brother of the Night's Watch. It's explicitly said in the first book. Robb, Bran, and Rickon would always have a place in his heart. But Grenn, Pyp, and Sam, they were his brothers now. The later seasons would test this commitment. When Robb declared war against the South, Jon wanted to ride and fight with him, which raised the question, who were his real brothers? The Night's Watch or the Starks? Ygritte tested his loyalty, which raised the question, who was he? A wildling or a man of the Night's Watch? When Stannis came to the Wall and offered to legitimize Jon and give him Winterfell after they won it back from the Boltons, again the question was raised. Who was he? A Stark or a brother of the Night's Watch? Time and time again, Jon has made the decision to stick with the Night's Watch, and for the most part, it was the right one. If Jon had left to join Robb, he probably would have died in the Red Wedding. If he had stayed with the Wildlings, he probably would have been executed by Ser Alliser for betraying the Night's Watch. If he left with Stannis, he probably would have died along with him and his men. Staying true to his brothers was the correct decision for the most part, until the Watch betrayed him. His resurrection offered a really unique position for Jon. Throughout the entire story, Jon has stayed true to the Night's Watch. He had to stay in the north while Ned and Robb died in the south. As far as he knows, Bran, Rickon, and Arya are all dead or missing. Sansa is in the hands of the enemy. As far as he knows, he's the last of his kind. He's the last wolf. But then he died and was brought back to life. When he died, his watch ended. Jon Snow is no longer a man of the Night's Watch. He paid for his freedom with his life. So what does he do now? When Sansa came to him, that answer was clear. He would go home. Jon Snow chose to be a Stark. He made that choice. He fought for his home and for his family. The Lords of the North declared him king in the North. He finally had a place. He had a purpose. He belonged to the North. The fight against the White Walkers was his purpose. He would be the one to lead the living in the fight against the dead, which is why it's so downright cruel to have Arya be the one to kill the Night King.
Jon Snow has always been the hero, the one who's been the savior, but it just didn't seem right to us for this moment.
Do you honestly think you're fucking funny? So go and fuck yourself. Go and fucking crawl in a dirty, dank little hole where you fucking come from, you dirty, dragon-eating little fucking spastic.
Jon committed his life to stopping the White Walkers. This right here would have been the perfect final battle between the living and the dead. Jon would kill the Night King at the cost of his own life. He would kill the Night King and collapse to the ground, bleeding out in the snow. In his final moments, Ghost would curl up next to him. The last thing he would see would be Ghost. Ghost would represent everything that Jon had been. Ghost was his friend when he was the lowly bastard of Winterfell. He was with him when the men of the Night's Watch declared him Lord Commander. He remained loyal when he let the wildlings through the wall, when everyone else betrayed him. He was there when he died for the first time, and he was the only one who stayed with him when he was brought back to life. He was by his side when he was named King of the North, and in the end, he would be there. A last reminder of who he really is. Not a bastard, not a man of the Night's Watch, not a Targaryen, but a Stark. In the books, Ghost is named that not only for his white fur and red eyes, but because he moves without making a sound. When he attacks, he doesn't make any noise. He doesn't bark, he doesn't whine, he doesn't growl. But when Jon dies, for good this time, Ghost howls. One last cry, not only for his master, but for his friend. But that didn't happen, because this isn't the King of the North. This isn't the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. This isn't the man who let thousands of wildlings through the wall, saving them. This isn't even Jon Snow, the bastard of Winterfell. I don't know who this is.
You maniacs! You blew it up! Oh, damn you! God damn you all to hell!
In the end, I will look back on Game of Thrones fondly. The first 6 seasons of the show were some of the best in television. It's up there with Breaking Bad and The Sopranos for me. But there's always going to be an asterisk next to Game of Thrones for me. It was great, but it could have been perfect. But it wasn't, due to the incompetence and selfishness of the showrunners. I guess all I can hope for now is to read the true ending of A Song of Ice and Fire whenever A Dream of Spring comes out whenever I'm fucking 30. And while I did enjoy House of Dragon a lot, there's always going to be that thought in the back of my mind, wondering what could have been.